Hey, my name is David Boice. My weird thing is a few years ago, I visited a new church each week, wrote a book about it called 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, and recently I got bored and decided to start my own YouTube channel, kind of talking a little bit about the experience. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the weird things that I experienced and observed, especially when it came to some of the megachurches that I visited in terms of what they did for mass following techniques to bring its congregation closer to Christ. But is it good? For this video, you may experience witnessing a rhythmically challenged man, aka me, try to attempt some dance moves in the name of trying to be funny. I would say if you're a man, hide your women and children. If you are a man, you may also want to close your eyes and cover your ears because I don't know what's going to happen next. Because I have a lot of extra white paper on hand and a red marker to write on it, I decided that I will write out this disclaimer form here to warn you about bad dancing in this video. I also don't have a graphic design department, so that's why it's on that. Here we go. So a few years ago, I was at work and a colleague asked, "Hey Dave, I want to show you a video." He said it featured a shirtless guy in his shorts dancing. I told him, I got more important work to do, thank you very much. But he insisted. In the video, it basically features a lone nut job, basically like whipping out some really bad dance moves. This is where you want to cover your eyes and cover your ears and close your eyes. Got that wrong. But basically what happens is a second guy joins in. And what happens with the second guy is like he also starts doing the dance moves. Not these dance moves, whatever the heck I'm doing, but better ones. And the first guy embraces the second guy as an equal. So pretty soon, the follower starts to wave over all of his friends. And next thing you know, a third guy joins in. Then a fourth. Then a fifth and a sixth. And then the floodgates open. And pretty soon, you have hundreds of concert goers getting off their derrieres, racing down a hill, and they are just swarming for this dance party. Like Macarena kind of stuff, just everything. It's just nuts. So it was absurd. And yet in its visual ridiculousness, like that just was, it was fascinating to see how quickly one guy, just one, had unintentionally started this rapid mass following. So there were various TED Talks about this, this whole social observation in terms of how effective leadership all boiled down to having one guy finding a follower who he would treat as an equal, who then would set the perfect conditions to ignite a movement. And it was like this quick fix recipe to answer and engineer any type of mass following that you could do. And after watching the video and then experiencing what I had done when it came to a lot of the megachurches and charismatic churches I had witnessed, suddenly something kind of hit. And since this video with the dancing guy apparently has about 1.5 million views at this point, there's a couple things that I noticed that some of these megachurch and mega ministries basically borrowed from that to force engineer their own mass followings. So here we go. Number 1, plant shills in the congregation. So when I visited the largest megachurch in the United States, I was on cloud 9. I thought it was amazing. But there were a lot of things in the back of my head after leaving that church that really bothered me. For instance, there were no crosses. There was no religious type of symbolism. When I walked through the door, the very first thing that greeted me was a poster of the Megachurch's pastor's newest book. On the other side of the entrance, there was a bookstore with piles and piles of books, again, of its megachurch, megapastor's latest recent book. Now, when it came to this church, they would boast 40 to 50,000 congregants each week. The pastor on Twitter had about 10 million followers. And as of this recording, I have 10 subscribers. I have some ways to go on that. Now, when I got to the church, I was trying to look for a good seat. And one of the production guys actually invited me to one of the very front rows. I was ecstatic. Like, I thought this was, once in a lifetime opportunity. So when I got seated by the people around me, they were all baby boomer generation. I can't tell you the amount of Dockers khakis and Macy's floral dresses that I encountered in that front row. So the question is, if you have a baby boomer majority at a worship rock concert, which what it was, how do you create a memorable visual for your viewing audience that has to watch on TV? So the answer that I got was you plant a bunch of dancing guy shills within your congregation. So when I was there on stage, there were 50 plus choir members. They would sway back and forth, their hands going like this, clapping and waving, all to a pace and a rhythm. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but something that seemed out of place was there was a bunch of different people that were littered throughout the congregation that were not like that typical demographic that I had seen, with all the Dockers khakis and the Macy's floral blouses. There were these other people that looked like models. Like, I'm talking A-lister fashion. And a lot of these people, like, I could easily mistake them for the Black Eyed Peas. Like will.i.am, Fergie, whoever. Like, these people just had this hipster kind of cool vibe to them. No way would I imagine that they wanted to be at church. They looked like they wanted to party. And when the music got going for worship, these individuals, these young, cool models, they basically took the lead in the audience and they started jumping up and down, kind of like Tigger on a pogo stick. And they were just full of energy. They were waving their hands like they just don't care. And it helped influence everyone around me, myself included, where everyone felt safe to publicly express their inner spirit. And even for my cool demeanor, like, I was pumped. And immediately after the worship service, that's when the tithe buckets came out. And I'll be honest, that was the biggest amount of money I ever threw in a collection plate. So looking back, and given the demographics of the people that were around me, my memories started tugging at me where something seemed off. if this was what I had learned from that dancing guy video that my coworker had showed me, basically the choir were the leaders, these models were the first followers, and the congregation and myself, we were the piling on concert goers. And I can't prove that this is true or not, but I could feel it. And one of the things that kind of bothered me after seeing this is it right for churches to plant people within its congregation who are there to fast track momentum in the congregation under the disguise of being Holy Spirit filled? Interesting. Number 2, herding the front rows. There was one church that I went to in Texas. Now, Texas is basically like a Christian cocktail of the Bible Belt. The different type of churches you go to there are completely different than outside of the Bible Belt. And one thing as well, they're not called worship services, it's called experiences. And when I got there, at this particular one, I took a seat probably within the 4th or 5th row from the front, but there were a lot of empty seats in front of me. And I remember that there was an earpiece wearing production lady that basically just came up to my entire section of that church, and she herded us. She roped us all together and forced us to all come forward in our seats to sit towards the front. And I felt like I was being herded like cattle. And I found out real quick just how fast lights, camera, action is to a lot of charismatic Texas megachurches. So, as I later learned, it was all a show. This megachurch was pretty blatant in its promotion of its pastor's upcoming book at that time, where they were trying to get pre-orders for it. And I remember that at first I came as a Christ follower. But after I watched the sermon on YouTube later on, I found myself used as a pawn where I was seated in the front row along with everyone else that had been herded up front. We were all there for a camera shot. We were all there to fake social proof for this pastor that his following was bigger than it actually was. And that was something that really tugged at me for a while. It wasn't until the third thing that really kind of gave some evidence for what some of these very popular megachurches will do to fake social proof. So, number 3, organized spontaneous baptisms. Here we go. So, a few years back, there was a booming megachurch in Charlotte, and they attracted controversy after they published a how-to guide to pull off spontaneous baptisms. Turned out, their spontaneous baptisms were planned ahead of time with volunteers planted in the congregation that would help lead the charge. So the way I remember their how-to guide started was basically 15 people would be seated in the worship experience, and the very first ones that would move through the congregation would come up after the pastor would give the call. And the plan was for these worshipers to move intentionally from the very high visible points within the church from the very back. So these people were not coming up from the front, they were coming up from the back, going straight down the aisles so everyone could see them. So the staging was part of the church's way of doing our part in God's miracle to bring people closer to Christ. And to critics who found out about the how-to guide, it was basically faking peer pressure. It was faking peer pressure to boost baptism numbers, being deceptive, force engineering fake followers to try and gain true followers to Jesus. Now, this was a huge megachurch, and I never really thought that this would be a big problem after learning about it. But then I went to I regularly attended a church from a significant other, and I attended this church for about 2 years. And they also would do baptisms maybe every other month. And they would have their number of people that would go up, but at the end, the pastor would say, "Is there anyone else here that wants to be baptized?" The first time, a lady who was very front and center within the congregation threw her name in the hat. She just stood up, stood in the, no extra clothes on hand, got into the baptism pool, baptized. Everyone was happy. Can't believe she just randomly, spontaneously got baptized. The second time, the pastor once again asked at the end of baptizing everyone that was already planned, "Is there anyone else here that wants to be baptized?" And there was a disabled child in the congregation. I'm not sure if he ever was in the congregation before, who could not talk, but apparently had enough of a ruckus to influence his parents to also be baptized that day. I'm glad he was baptized, but after knowing and studying some of the deceptive type of church techniques I had seen, I didn't feel right about it, and I could be wrong. Maybe it was spontaneous, maybe this was spirit-filled, but there was just too much that I had seen that made me question it. And I remember after that baptism scene, my significant other people within the church were just floored, praising God, praising the Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit was in our church. And I didn't feel the same. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I didn't feel good about it, because is it okay to lie for Jesus to gain new followers? That's where I have an issue with. So as evident with the dancing guy video from YouTube, there's techniques that have been engineered to gain a mass following. And with a lot of the numbers-seeking megachurches, they kind of took note of it. And the question kind of boils down to an ethical question. Is it right or wrong for charismatic, numbers-seeking churches to lie for Jesus in order to bring its congregation closer to Jesus? I think it's manipulative, but I'd be interested to hear your stories and your comments below, because I don't know for sure. So this is David Boice, 52 churches in 52 weeks. Hit the like or subscribe button to get more updates, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks.